October 15, 1971, Detroit, Michigan. The engineer from Flint stood in the Cadillac design studio staring at blueprints that made no sense. A luxury pickup truck from Cadillac. In 1971, those three words together sounded like someone speaking backwards. The executive from New York had flown in that morning with orders straight from the top. Build something nobody expected. Build something that would shake the whole industry awake. Build the impossible. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and burned coffee. Outside, rain hammered the windows hard enough to sound like gravel. The designer from California traced his finger along the hood lines they'd sketched. 84 inches long. That was longer than most dining room tables. The thing would weigh 4,800 pounds empty. Add a full tank of gas and a driver, you were looking at 5,200 pounds of American steel and chrome rolling down the highway. They'd been working on this project for 6 months already, though nobody outside this room knew it existed. The accountant from Chicago had run the numbers 40 times. Each truck would cost $28,000 to build. In 1971, you could buy a house for that. A nice house with a 2-car garage and a quarter-acre yard. But Cadillac wasn't building houses. They were building dreams, and dreams didn't come cheap. The marketing director from Dallas pushed his glasses up his nose. Sweat made them slide right back down. The heating system in the old building ran full blast, no matter the weather outside. 110 degrees in summer, they got heat. 30 below in winter, they got heat. Today it was 55 and raining, and the radiators clanged like someone beating pipes with a hammer. Who's going to buy this? The question hung in the air like the smoke from their lucky strikes. The engineer from Flint had an answer, but it wasn't one anybody wanted to hear. Rich people who wanted to haul boats. Oil executives who needed to look successful at the ranch. Athletes who had more money than sense. The market was there, but it was thin as paper and twice as fragile. The prototype sat in the secure garage 3 floors down. They'd started with a standard Cadillac Eldorado chassis and built up from there. The wheelbase stretched 132 inches. The bed measured 72 inches long, 48 inches wide. Not huge by pickup standards, but this wasn't meant for hauling concrete blocks. This was meant for hauling golf clubs to the country club, skiing equipment to Aspen, maybe a pair of dirt bikes to the desert. 3 days later, they fired up the engine for the first time. The 500 cubic inch V8 roared to life like something angry waking up. 400 horses under that endless hood. 700 pound-feet of torque. Enough power to pull a yacht up a mountain if you needed to. The mechanic from Toledo checked the gauges. Oil pressure perfect. Temperature holding steady at 180 degrees. Fuel pump delivering 14 gallons per hour at full throttle. The test driver from Indianapolis took it out on the track first. 0 to 60 in 8.2 seconds. That was sports car territory in 1971. The speedometer went to 120, and the truck would bury the needle if you gave it enough room. But speed wasn't the point. The point was presence. The point was rolling up to the valet at the Ritz and having everyone stop to stare. November turned to December. Snow fell heavy across Michigan, 8 inches overnight, then another 6 the next day. The prototype handled it like it was built for Alaska. The weight helped. All that mass pressing down on the rear wheels gave traction where lighter trucks would spin. The engineer from Flint made notes, added another leaf spring to the rear suspension, tweaked the gear ratios in the differential, small changes that would make big differences. The interior guy from Memphis had been working 18-hour days, real leather everywhere, not just the seats, the door panels, the dash, even the ceiling. Walnut trim from trees that were 200 years old, carpet thick enough to lose your keys in. The radio alone cost more than most people made in a month. AM/FM stereo with 8-track player, 4 speakers, 20 watts per channel. You could hear it clear from 200 feet away with the windows up. January 8, 1972, the boardroom at Cadillac headquarters. 20 men in dark suits sat around a table that cost more than the average American made in 5 years. The prototype pictures lay spread across the polished wood. Nobody spoke for 3 minutes. The CEO from Connecticut finally broke the silence. "Build 50, see what happens." 50 trucks. That was the decision that would either make them geniuses or fools. The factory in Lansing had to retool an entire production line. Special jigs for the extended frame, different welding sequences for the bed attachment points, new paint booths to handle the longer body. The plant manager from Wisconsin calculated they'd need 6 weeks to set everything up. He got 4. The first production model rolled off the line on March 2, 1972. Fire mist gold with a buckskin leather interior. It sat in the inspection bay while 20 quality control engineers went over every inch. Panel gaps measured with gauges that could detect differences of 1/32 of an inch. Paint thickness checked in 40 different spots. Every single bolt torqued to specification and marked with paint to show it had been verified. The truck weighed 4,920 pounds fully equipped. The air conditioning system alone added 80 pounds, but could cool the cabin from 120 degrees to 70 in 4 minutes. The power windows, all 4 of them, could go from fully closed to fully open in 3.8 seconds. The power seats adjusted in 8 directions. Even the mirrors were power adjusted. Something you didn't see on most luxury cars yet. They called it the Mirage because that's what it seemed like. Something you might see shimmering in the desert heat that couldn't possibly be real. A Cadillac pickup truck. The press release went out on March 15th. The phone at headquarters rang nonstop for 3 days. Half the calls were from people who thought it was an early April Fool's joke. The other half wanted to know where they could buy one. The dealer from Phoenix ordered 5 sight unseen. He knew his customers, ranchers who owned spreads bigger than some eastern states, mining executives who commuted between the city and remote operations, retired Hollywood types who had moved to Scottsdale and wanted something nobody else had. The price landed at $34,900. In 1972, that would buy you 3 regular pickup trucks with money left over for gas for a year. April brought the first real problem. The weight distribution was wrong. Too much mass up front, not enough over the rear axle. When you hit the brakes hard from 70 miles per hour, the back end would come up like a bucking horse. The engineer from Flint spent 2 weeks redesigning the suspension geometry, moved the fuel tank back 18 inches, added 120 pounds of reinforcement to the bed floor. Small changes that made the difference between dangerous and merely dramatic. The first customer delivery happened on May 10, 1972, in Beverly Hills. An actor who'd made his money in westerns but lived in Bel Air. He'd ordered it in cotillion white with red leather interior. The delivery specialist from Las Vegas spent 2 hours going over every feature. The cruise control that could hold 70 miles per hour up a 6% grade. The automatic climate control that would maintain cabin temperature within 2 degrees no matter what was happening outside. The theft deterrent system that would sound an alarm that could be heard from a quarter mile away. By June, they'd sold 23 trucks. Not bad for something that cost more than most people's houses. But the problems were mounting. The air conditioning compressor failed on 3 units. All 3 were in Arizona, where the temperature hit 115 degrees. The company flew in mechanics from Detroit, fixed them on site, then redesigned the entire system to handle extreme heat better. Added a larger condenser, upgraded the refrigerant capacity from 3 pounds to 4.5 pounds, installed a secondary cooling fan that kicked in at 210 degrees. The journalist from Car and Driver got hold of one in July, took it to their test track in Ohio. The numbers were impressive, but the conclusion was harsh. "A solution in search of a problem," he wrote. "Like a tuxedo with steel-toed boots, the Mirage doesn't know what it wants to be." The review stung because there was truth in it. The bed was too small for real work. The luxury was too much for a job site. It existed in a space between worlds that might not actually exist. August 1972. The assembly line in Lansing. They were building 3 trucks per week, down from the planned 5. Each one took 42 man-hours to complete, compared to 14 for a standard Cadillac. The welders from Akron had to be specially trained on the unique joints where the bed met the cabin. One bad weld and the whole thing could come apart at highway speeds. They X-rayed every joint, something normally reserved for aircraft manufacturing. The businessman from Houston bought 2, one in black for him, one in silver for his wife. He owned 14 oil wells in West Texas and wanted something that could handle the ranch roads, but still valet park at the country club. The first time he drove it to his property outside Midland, the ranch hands stopped working just to watch it pass. 5,000 pounds of Cadillac bouncing over cattle guards like a yacht in heavy seas. September brought a recall. The power steering pump could fail without warning. Only affected 12 trucks, but in a production run of 50, that was almost a quarter of them. The fix required pulling the entire front end apart. The mechanics worked around the clock, flying to wherever the trucks were, rather than having customers bring them in. Cost Cadillac $300,000 to fix 12 trucks. The accountant from Chicago started drinking his lunch. The engineer from Flint hadn't slept more than 4 hours straight in 6 months. His wife said he talked about torque specifications in his sleep. His kids drew pictures of pickup trucks at school. His whole life had become about solving problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. Why did a luxury truck need to go 120 miles per hour? Because it was a Cadillac. Why did it need real walnut trim? Because it was a Cadillac. Every answer led back to the same place. They were building something that had to be 2 opposite things at once. October 1972, 1 year since the project started. They'd sold 31 trucks, had orders for 6 more. The factory space could be producing Eldorados that would sell for nearly the same price with half the complexity. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. The lawyer from Boston pointed out the liability issues. The insurance company had classified the Mirage as a commercial vehicle, which meant commercial insurance rates. Customers were looking at $2,000 a year just for insurance. November 3, 1972, Black Friday for the Mirage. A customer in Miami was showing off to friends, took a corner too fast, rolled it 3 times. The truck performed exactly as designed. The reinforced cab structure held, the doors still opened, nobody was seriously hurt. But the pictures made every newspaper from Florida to Maine. 5,000 pounds of Cadillac upside down in a palm tree. The jokes wrote themselves. The final board meeting happened on November 20th. The CEO from Connecticut didn't waste words. "We're done. Finish the orders on hand. No new ones." The room was quiet as a morgue. 43 trucks built, 7 more to go to fill existing orders. Then the most expensive experiment in Cadillac history would be over. The engineer from Flint stood in the empty production bay on December 15, 1972. The last Mirage had rolled out that morning. Tuxedo black with antelope interior, headed for a buyer in Colorado who'd already owned 3 Cadillacs and wanted something nobody else would ever have. He'd get his wish. 50 trucks total. That was it. The cleanup took 3 weeks. All the special tooling got scrapped. The dies for the unique body panels went to long-term storage in a warehouse outside Detroit. The assembly line got reconfigured for Eldorado production. By January 1973, it was like the Mirage had never existed, except for 50 trucks scattered across America and a balance sheet that showed a $12 million loss. The mechanic from Toledo kept one of the prototype badges, hung it in his garage next to his tools. Sometimes customers would ask about it. He'd tell them about the truck that couldn't decide what it was. Too fancy for work, too crude for luxury, caught between worlds like a fish trying to climb a tree. The designer from California went back to drawing regular Cadillacs, long, low, elegant things that knew exactly what they were. But sometimes, late at night in his home studio, he'd sketch pickup trucks, not Cadillacs, just trucks. Simple things that hauled and towed and didn't apologize for it. He never showed anyone these drawings. The marketing director from Dallas had tried everything: ads in Field and Stream for the outdoor crowd, ads in Fortune for the executive crowd, ads in Architectural Digest for the luxury crowd. None of them worked because the message was impossible. Buy this 50,000-pound yacht that was also somehow a speedboat. Buy this tuxedo that was also work clothes. Buy this thing that didn't know what it was. January 1973. A Mirage owner in Nevada was hauling a horse trailer over the Sierras. The temperature dropped to 5 below zero. The truck never hesitated. 500 cubic inches of American V8 pulling 2 tons of horses up a 7% grade at 60 miles per hour. The heater keeping the cabin at a steady 72 degrees, the 8-track playing Merle Haggard clear as a bell. For that moment, in that place, the Mirage made perfect sense. But moments don't build markets. The accountant from Chicago had the final numbers by February. Total development cost, $8 million. Total production cost, $14 million. Total revenue, $1.7 million. The single biggest loss on a single model in Cadillac history. Harvard Business School would use it as a case study for 20 years. The 50 trucks scattered like seeds in the wind. One ended up in Alaska, hauling supplies to a gold mine. The owner loved that he could do a day's work, then drive to the best restaurant in Anchorage without changing vehicles. One went to Florida, where it spent most of its life pulling boats that cost more than houses. The salt air ate at it, but the owner kept fixing it, spending more on restoration than he'd paid for it new. The actor in Beverly Hills wrapped his around a telephone pole in 1974. Blood alcohol 3 times the legal limit. The truck saved his life. All that steel and reinforcement turned what should have been a fatality into a few broken ribs and a career-ending scandal. The insurance company paid out $40,000 for the truck. It got parted out, pieces ending up in junkyards from Riverside to San Diego. By 1975, the Mirage was already becoming legend, the kind of thing people claimed to have seen, but nobody quite believed. A Cadillac pickup truck? Sure, and I saw a Ferrari tractor yesterday. But the owners knew. They had the registration papers. They had the repair bills. They had 5,000 pounds of proof parked in their garages. The engineer from Flint left Cadillac in 1976, went to work for a company that made actual work trucks. Simple things with vinyl seats and rubber floors. He understood them. They made sense. But sometimes he'd see an Eldorado on the road and remember bolting a pickup bed to one, remember trying to make 2 things into one and ending up with neither. March 1980. A collector in Texas bought 3 Mirages from different owners, paid $60,000 each, more than double their original price, started what would become the Mirage Registry, tracking down all 50 trucks. By then, 11 had been wrecked. 4 had been exported to Saudi Arabia, where oil sheikhs used them as toys. 35 were still in America, most of them hidden in garages, pulled out only for special occasions. The businessman from Houston still had both of his. The black one had 40,000 miles, the silver one had 12,000. He'd been offered 100,000 for the pair, turned it down, said they were part of his story now, the trucks that shouldn't have existed but did. Like finding a dinosaur in your backyard. You don't sell that. You keep it to prove it was real. 1985, the 10-year reunion of Mirage owners in Las Vegas. 17 trucks showed up. They lined them up in front of the Caesars Palace, all that impossible steel shining in the desert sun. The valet didn't know whether to park them with the trucks or the luxury cars. They ended up creating their own section. The Impossibles, someone called them. The name stuck. The mechanic from Toledo died in 1987. His widow found 12 boxes of Mirage parts in the garage, new old stock pieces he'd been hoarding, a complete engine rebuild kit, 3 transmissions, body panels still wrapped in Cosmoline. She sold it all to the collector in Texas for enough to pay off the house and have money left over. Her husband had always said those trucks would be worth something someday. By 1990, only 41 Mirages could be accounted for. The others had vanished into history, probably crushed, melted down, recycled into regular cars that made sense. The surviving trucks were worth more than anyone could have imagined. The clean ones were pulling $250,000 at auction. The rough ones still got six figures. The market had finally caught up to the madness. The designer from California saw one at a car show in 1992, cotillion white with red interior, possibly the same one the actor had owned before his crash. It had been restored beyond factory specifications. Better paint, better chrome, better everything. It was the Mirage that should have been, but never was. He stood there for an hour, remembering the smoke-filled room in Detroit, the arguments about bed length, the certainty that they were building something revolutionary. 1995. The businessman from Houston died. His will specified that the two Mirages should be donated to a museum. They ended up at the Peterson in Los Angeles, parked between a Duesenberg and a Tucker. 3 failed experiments in automotive ambition. The placard explained the Mirage in clinical terms: production numbers, specifications, prices. It didn't mention the meetings that ran until dawn, the engineers who lost their marriages, the dream of building something impossible. A journalist tracked down the engineer from Flint in 1998. He was 73, living in a retirement community in Arizona, still sharp, still able to recite torque specifications from memory. Asked if he regretted the Mirage, he thought for a long moment. "We built 50 trucks that shouldn't have existed," he said. "But they did exist. We made them real. How many people can say that? How many people get to build their impossible thing?" 2000. Y2K. The Mirage registry counted 38 surviving trucks. The newest technology in them was the 8-track player. They'd outlasted disco, outlasted the Cold War, outlasted the companies that made half their parts. The collector in Texas had acquired 7 of them. He had a climate-controlled warehouse just for Mirages. Once a month, he'd start them all, let them run for an hour, filling the space with the sound of 3,500 cubic inches of American V8. The last public sale of a Mirage happened in 2001, September 10th, the day before everything changed. A perfect example: 12,000 original miles, painted in a color called fire mist pewter that Cadillac only offered for 6 months. It sold for $400,000 to a collector from Japan who shipped it to Tokyo, where it would be the only one in Asia. The new owner said he bought it because it represented American optimism, the belief that anything was possible, even impossible things. 2005. The designer from California died. His obituary mentioned his work on the Eldorado, the Seville, the Alante. One line about the Mirage. Also contributed to special projects. That was it. 50 trucks that had consumed 2 years of his life reduced to 4 words. His son found the sketches in the garage, hundreds of drawings of pickup trucks, not Cadillacs, just trucks. He donated them to the design school at Art Center. Students studied them to understand what happens when vision exceeds reality. The mechanic from Toledo's badge ended up in the Henry Ford Museum, part of an exhibit on automotive failures that changed the industry: the Tucker, the Edsel, the DeLorean, the Mirage. The placard called it ambitious but misguided. The badge sat under glass, the gold plating worn from his thumb, rubbing it for luck during those impossible months when they were trying to make 2 things into one. 2010. A Mirage appeared on a reality TV show about rare cars. The hosts didn't know what to make of it. Too weird for the classic truck guys. Too truck for the luxury car guys. It sat there between worlds just like it always had. They tried to drive it hard, make good television, but the owner had limited them to 40 miles per hour. These weren't toys anymore. They were artifacts. Proof of a time when American companies would bet millions on maybes. The accountant from Chicago lived to 91. Never spoke about the Mirage to his family. His grandson found the ledgers after he died. Page after page of red ink. $12 million in 1972 money. Adjusted for inflation, that was nearly $100 million in 2015 dollars, all for 50 trucks. The grandson was an accountant too. He couldn't understand it. Why not just stop after the first 10, after the first 20? The answer was in his grandfather's handwriting on the final page. Because we said we would build 50. 2015, a barn find in North Dakota. Mirage number 39, missing for 20 years. It had been parked in 1983 with a blown transmission. The farmer who owned it had died, his kids had inherited, never knew what was under the tarp. A restoration shop from California bought it for $50,000 sight unseen, spent $300,000 bringing it back, sold it for $600,000 to a tech billionaire who'd been born in 1985 and thought the whole story was romantic. Building the impossible because you could. The marketing director from Dallas died in 2016. His widow gave his papers to Southern Methodist University. Boxes of failed campaigns, ads that tried to sell something that couldn't be sold. His notes from the final meeting were there too. We built a truck for people who don't exist yet. 44 years later, those people were paying $500,000 for the trucks nobody wanted. 2018. The collector in Texas died. His 7 Mirages sold at auction for a combined $3.2 million. The cheapest one, missing its original engine, still brought $300,000. The buyers were from China, Dubai, Germany, places where American excess from the 1970s had become high art. The trucks got crated, shipped, would never touch American soil again. Today, the Mirage registry lists 33 surviving trucks, 6 in museums, 20 in private collections, 7 whereabouts unknown, but presumed to exist. The cheapest one for sale is listed at $750,000, needs everything. The engine locked up, the interior rotted, the bed rusted through, but it has the VIN. It has the proof that it was one of the 50. The engineer from Flint was right. They built their impossible thing, 50 trucks that lived between worlds. Too much and not enough. Too early and too late. They failed by every measure that mattered in 1972, but they succeeded at something else. They proved that even huge companies sometimes swing for the fences, sometimes build things because they can, not because they should. The last Mirage will probably outlive everyone who remembers why they were impossible. Someone will find it in a garage in 2075, wonder why Cadillac built a pickup truck. They won't understand the meetings, the arguments, the certainty that luxury truck buyers were just around the corner. They'll just see 5,000 pounds of steel and chrome that shouldn't exist but does. That's the thing about impossible objects. They don't have to make sense. They just have to be. 50 times Cadillac bolted a pickup bed to a luxury car. 50 times they created something that belonged nowhere, and that nowhere turned out to be worth millions. Just took 40 years for nowhere to become somewhere. The Mirage failed because it succeeded at being exactly what it was. A luxury truck when nobody wanted a luxury truck. Cadillac tried to create a market that wouldn't exist for another 30 years. They built 50 trucks for customers who hadn't been born yet. That's not a business plan, that's time travel. And time travel is expensive. They could have built Eldorados, DeVilles, Fleetwoods, cars people understood, cars that fit in existing boxes. Instead, they built 50 questions with wheels, 50 arguments about what American luxury could be. They lost $12 million finding out the answer was, not this, not yet. But those 50 trucks are still out there, in climate-controlled garages from Tokyo to Dubai, under tarps in barns nobody's opened in decades, in museums next to other beautiful failures. They're proof that in 1972, a bunch of engineers in Detroit decided to build something impossible, and then they actually built it 50 times. The market caught up eventually. Today, every luxury brand builds trucks. Mercedes, BMW, even Bentley. $100,000 pickups are normal now. The roads are full of leather-lined trucks with heated steering wheels and massage seats. The world the Mirage was built for finally exists. It just exists without the Mirage. That's the cruelest joke. They were right. There was a market for a Cadillac pickup truck. They just found it 40 years too early. Like discovering fire before anyone's cold. Like inventing the airplane before anyone wants to fly. Right idea, wrong. Century. $12 million to be 4 decades early to a party that would absolutely happen. The 7 missing Mirages are the best part of the story. They could be anywhere, buried in collapsed barns, hidden in forgotten storage units, shipped to countries that don't keep records. Maybe one's at the bottom of a lake, insurance fraud from 1978. Maybe one's still being daily driven by someone who doesn't know what they have. 7 ghosts of an impossible dream, hiding in plain sight or rotting in the dark. Someone will find one eventually, always happens. They'll post pictures online, ask what it is. The 17 remaining Mirage owners will lose their minds. The value of every surviving truck will jump another 100,000. News articles will recap the story. 50 trucks, 2 years, $12 million. The same beats like a song everyone knows, but nobody can quite remember who wrote it. The Mirage disappeared after 2 years because it was built for a world that didn't exist yet. Cadillac thought they were building for 1972. They were actually building for 2010. That's a long time to wait for customers to catch up. Too long for quarterly earnings, too long for board members, too long for anyone except collectors who understand that failure can be more interesting than success. Every Mirage that still exists is worth more than 10 successful Cadillacs from the same era. The Eldorados are nice, the DeVilles are beautiful, but they're normal, they fit, they make sense. The Mirage doesn't fit anywhere, which makes it fit everywhere. It's the truck that shouldn't be, owned by people who paid $750,000 for, shouldn't. The engineer from Flint had one thing wrong. He said they built 50 trucks that shouldn't have existed. That's not quite right. They built 50 trucks that shouldn't have existed yet. There's a difference. One's a mistake. The other's prophecy. $12 million for prophecy seems almost reasonable when you put it that way. The last Mirage will sell for $10 million. Maybe not this decade. Maybe not next. But eventually, when there's only one left that still runs, that still has all its original parts, that still carries the ghost of that smoke-filled room in Detroit where someone said, "luxury pickup truck," and nobody laughed. That last one will be worth more than all 50 cost to build. That's how the market apologizes for being 40 years late to understand. The Mirage disappeared because Cadillac couldn't afford to wait for the world to make sense of it. 2 years, 50 trucks, $12 million, then back to building cars that people understood, cars that fit in existing categories, cars that didn't require explanation. The safe path, the profitable path, the path that didn't end with engineers drinking at lunch and designers sketching trucks they'd never show anyone. But for 2 years, Cadillac built impossible things. That's the part worth remembering, not the failure, not the money lost, not the jokes about tuxedos with work boots, the fact that they tried, that they built all 50 even when they knew by truck 20 that it wasn't working, that they kept every promise even when the promises were clearly mistakes. That's what those surviving 33 trucks really are, not vehicles, promises kept. 50 promises that luxury and utility could share the same space. 50 promises that Cadillac could be more than long, low, and elegant. 50 promises that the impossible was worth attempting. 33 of those promises are still out there, still running, still worth more than anyone imagined. The Mirage didn't disappear. It went into hiding. Waiting for the world to catch up, waiting for luxury trucks to make sense, waiting for collectors to value failure more than success. The wait is over now. The 33 survivors are treasures. The 7 missing ones are mysteries. All 50 are legends. That's why the Cadillac Mirage disappeared after just 2 years. Because 2 years was all it took to build 50 legends. After that, what was left to do? Build a 51st? That would have just been a truck. The 50 they built were something else. They were beautiful mistakes, expensive questions, impossible objects that insisted on existing, and they're still out there, in garages and museums and warehouses, under tarps and behind locked doors. 5,000 pounds of proof that sometimes car companies swing for fences that don't exist yet. The Mirage disappeared because its job was done. 50 impossible things had been made real. In 1972, that was failure. Today, that's art. Thanks for joining us on this journey through one of history's most fascinating automotive failures that became legendary successes. If you found this story of the impossible Cadillac Mirage compelling, give it a like and share it with someone who appreciates these tales of ambition and beautiful failures. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of when automakers dared to build the impossible.